So good morning. Thanks everyone for coming along to my session. Wow, this is a big room, so hopefully I'm going to keep you entertained for the whole 60 minutes. I guess if you hadn't heard, we had the launch of Windows Server 2012 this morning. We had an event in the US, basically came out about 3 o'clock this morning. So what I'm going to run you through today is basically an overview of Windows Server 2012. And this is, there's basically so many things in this product that this literally is going to be an overview. We've got 10 other sessions here at TechEd this week around Windows Server 2012. And we've got about another 7, 8, 9 sessions around virtualization, which is obviously a huge part of Server 2012 as well. So there's a lot of other sessions here this week, so I'm basically going to run you through what I think are the more interesting features inside Windows Server. So my name's Nathan Mercer. I work for Microsoft here in Auckland. I'm one of the TechEd organisers. So if you want to give us brickbats or complaints or tell us nice things about TechEd, let us know. This is going to be a 200 level session. I'm not going to get super technical. I've got so many features to cover that this is not going to be a super technical session. But I'm more than happy to take questions as we go through, or take questions at the end. We feel this release of Windows Server is a really significant release. There's about 300 major new features, and there's about 3,500 other little tweaks and changes inside the Windows Server product. Frankly, this is going to take all of us a little while to get our heads around all the changes in this product. No matter what particular facet of Windows Server you look at, there's so many new things and so many things that have changed. And so what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to run through some particular workloads, and I'm going to run through, say, the top 10 or so features through a bunch of different areas. And near the end, I'll also put this resources slide up as well. We've got a bunch of other events and hands-on labs and things that we're going to be doing here in New Zealand. And I guess the first URL you might want to write down is this windows-server-launch.com. This basically went live this morning, and this is basically the central repository you can go to watch more training material, to download the final Windows Server 2012 code, things like that. And the cool thing about this is you basically earn points for everything that you do. And the more points you get, you basically go into a draw to win some pretty cool prizes. So you might want to write that URL down. We've also just this morning published a whole bunch of other online technical training around Windows Server 2012 at the second URL here, called Microsoft Virtual Academy, that some of you might have seen or heard of before. The other thing that we're going to be doing here in Auckland, and in fact around New Zealand, is we're going to be running these things that we call IT camps. And these are basically free, one-day, hands-on events that we run, and you guys basically bring your own laptops in, and we load up Windows Server 2012 on your machines, or we connect up with remote desktop and connect up to a bunch of servers in the US, and basically run you through basically Windows Server 2012 training. And we'll be announcing the dates for this probably next week, maybe the week after. If you follow my blog or follow me on Twitter or subscribe to the New Zealand TechNet Flash newsletter, we'll be announcing what those are there. And then the last thing I've put on this deck is we've basically made available for free about a 600 or 700 page PDF ebook all about Windows Server 2012, and it's actually a really good resource. So if you go to my blog or you download these slides, you'll be able to basically get a copy and find the URL for this. So I guess what is this new Windows Server release? Kind of what's new in it? Is this just another boring file and print Active Directory server? Kind of what's in it? And I guess it's worth just taking a couple of steps back for a few minutes and kind of thinking about the bigger picture of stuff that's kind of happening in the industry. And I think there's some pretty clear trends that are happening in the market, that are happening right now around people's data centers and your investments around IT. And I guess at an industry level, we are seeing this new fundamental shift over into cloud computing. And at the same time, we're seeing more and more people with smart mobile devices, 24/7, always connected, Microsoft devices and non-Microsoft devices, always wanting to have ubiquitous access to data. And I guess one of the things that we think is quite unique about this Windows Server release is it's basically a single platform that can be deployed in your premises, in a partner data center, or running up in something like Windows Azure, and it's basically one programming model, one operational management model. And I guess one of the interesting things that you're going to hear me talk about a little bit about is the unique things that we're doing around hybrid. The fact that we can make a Windows Server application stretch across your on-premises data center and into the cloud as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. I guess the other thing that's kind of happening, I guess in the industry from a technology trends point of view, are some other innovations that are happening around hardware. And I guess what we're seeing in modern data centers these days are some interesting things happening at the silicon level. More and more and more cores being put into each CPU socket. And so whether you're thinking about a single blade, a single system, a cluster, I guess the thing that should be becoming pretty clear to you is that storage, compute, and networking are all kind of co-evolving together. And sure, you might have lots of memory, you might have lots of CPU, but if things like your storage and your IOPS aren't keeping up, hard disks aren't getting any faster. You can do multi-tier storage and move to things like flash, flash and SSD and things like that. But we're seeing a lot of customers, the storage becomes, the bottleneck. And I guess what we've set out to do is be quite disruptive with this Windows Server release, and really try and nail some real hard value and some real hard cost savings, particularly around the storage and virtualization pieces of Windows Server. And these are done through hardware offloading techniques like RDMA, Remote Direct Memory Access cards. And I'll talk more about that as we go along as well. And I guess what all of this means, and what we're thinking about when we've been designing Windows Server over the last 3 years is built from the cloud up. We haven't just tacked on cloud afterwards. And cloud is not just something where you throw on a switch and suddenly you've got a cloud. Cloud is a lot about virtualization and a lot about platform features like being able to do chargeback and resource metering and things like that. But really, cloud is a journey. You need to have automation, chargeback, and and some of those things. And I think this is a clear case of where Microsoft has been eating our own dog food. Some of our big properties like Bing, Xbox Live, Azure are running on Windows Server 2012. For example, Bing's been running on Windows Server 2012 since the beta releases. We have an internal private cloud farm that we use for testing Windows Server 2012, made up of about 250,000 VMs that we test against. And even something like adding up all of the servers and VMs that run in something like like a Bing, it's probably an order of magnitude bigger than kind of all of the servers and all the VMs in New Zealand added up together. So we think there's going to be a lot of people that end up upgrading to Windows Server 2012. There's still a lot of people that are on Windows Server 2003 and Server 2008. And the rest of this presentation, I'm going to run through what I think are the kind of top 10 or so features in each particular area. And these are the kind of areas that I'm going to talk about. And when we think about the scenarios that Windows Server offers, it's infrastructure things like Active Directory and file on print, and all of those typical things that you guys are familiar with. It's the application stack with ASP.NET, and iOS, and I'm not really going to talk about much about that today. Probably most of you guys in the room are IT pros. And I think one of the other interesting things about this release is that we've done we've done a joint release with the Windows client, and we've thought about the better together scenarios of having the Windows client and Windows Server deployed at the same time. And on the bottom of the slide, through the technical capabilities, these are the areas that I'm basically going to run through. So we're going to have a look at virtualization. We're going to have a look at storage, and I'm going to do demos through most of these different scenarios. So let's talk about server virtualization first off. Obviously, server virtualization is a huge part of delivering a private cloud. And if you think about what Hyper-V is all about, we've basically seen our market share in the server virtualization space double or thereabouts in the last year. So we've gone from about 13% market share in New Zealand to about 26-27% market share. But we've also thought long and hard about what it's going to take inside Hyper-V to keep deploying it and to get into the bigger environments where we are not the main player. And so when we think about the kind of 4 areas that we've invested in, specifically around Hyper-V, it kind of boils down to 4 areas. So complete virtual machine mobility, high availability, secure multi-tenancy, and a lot of new interesting features around scale and performance. So let's kind of start off with number 1. This is something that we call...
I'm going to interrupt just to let you know. My name's Bradley Burrows. I'm actually the business group lead for Windows Server. And about 25 minutes ago, New Zealand just launched Windows Server from around the world. So it's all gone on the internet. You can get it now. It's available. Media releases have gone out. So we are now on the world stage with a whole lot of announcements going out. Steve Barler and Satana Dell, the head vice president of Windows Server Business Group, has just announced to the world that New Zealand has actually been the first country. So I'm be proud of where we're at right now. What Nathan's telling you is some of the first content in the world that's being shown in the RTM version. And over the next few days, Nathan's got some amazing prizes to give away, to say the least, over the next few hours. So thank you very much for everyone coming along, and congratulations.
Thanks, Brad. So, I guess the first area I'm going to talk about is something we call Hyper-V network virtualization. And this is when we think about what we needed to do inside Hyper-V, I guess there's 2 main audiences that we didn't necessarily address, particularly well in the older version of Hyper-V. I guess, yesterday's version, the 2008 R2 version. And that was, big customers that wanted to have secure multi-tenancy. So say I'm a government department and I don't trust all the different business units inside my company, and I want to provide VMs for them, and I want to have, completely secure multi-tenancy. The other big area where we struggled a little bit with Hyper-V as well was in the kind of service provider area, where basically I'm a Microsoft partner or what have you, and I want to basically resell VMs. I want to stand up a virtual machine infrastructure and basically charge you, 10 or 20 bucks a month for having a VM. And this is one of the key things that this Hyper-V network virtualization is all about. It's about delivering a secure, multi-tenant virtual network on a shared physical network. Another way to think about this is a word you're probably going to hear more and more, something we call SDN, or a software-defined network. So, so this logical network, which is defined inside software. And basically now, inside Hyper-V, when you set up network virtualization, basically each tenant gets a complete virtual network that's completely isolated away from everyone else, even at layer 2. And so I've got a complete virtual network, multiple virtual subnets, virtual routing, and basically each of my Hyper-V hosts has this software-defined networking policy that controls what each of those tenants can do on those virtual machines. Another way to think about it is just what virtualization has done to our operating systems and our workloads and decoupled them from the underlying hardware. This does exactly the same thing to the IP address. So if I'm a big hoster and I've got a bunch of different racks in my environment, each of those racks typically has a top of the rack switch, and that's an entire VLAN. And if I want to go and move, one VM from this rack to another, I'm having to go through pain of changing IP addresses, changing firewalls, changing policies, things like that. And this Hyper-V network virtualization basically solves that problem. It also has a bunch of other really interesting benefits. This lets us onboard two different tenants that might be using exactly the same IP address space. Imagine if customer 1 is using 192.168.1.1 and customer number 2 is also using 192.168.1.1. I can now run both of those on exactly the same physical infrastructure, the same shared server. And I think the other interesting thing, and I think this is going to be quite appropriate for New Zealanders, it basically lets me stretch a subnet in a hybrid way. So I might be a small or a medium business with just one particular workload that I want to offload and move into someone else's cloud, like a local partner here in Auckland, or for example. And with this software-defined network policy, I can basically take that IP address, move it outside my infrastructure, put it in someone else's cloud, but that application looks like it's running locally. Now, to be fair, it's actually fairly complicated the way that this works. This is all driven with PowerShell scripts, and so really the best way that you guys are going to have to deploy this is by using System Center 2012 Service Pack 1. And if you go to Stu Fox's session, which I think I've got the session titles up shortly, he is going to be doing some demos of using Service Pack 1 of Virtual Machine Manager 2012 to use the software-defined networking, and he'll be doing some demos around that. I mentioned one of the big things that we've tried to work on is giving you complete virtual machine mobility. So how can I completely decouple my VMs from the OS and move them around? Today, if you want to do that inside Hyper-V, you need to have a cluster, and I need to set up some sort of shared storage, an iSCSI SAN, a fiber channel SAN, what have you. Inside 2012, we've got this great new feature that we call Shared Nothing Live Migration. And literally, just with an Ethernet cable, I'm able to do a live migrate of a workload from one host to another with no downtime. And we basically take a few of the other underlying Hyper-V technologies that we've dramatically improved, like the ability to do live snapshot merges, which we've never been able to do before, and the ability to now do a live storage migration. So I leave my virtual machine runtime where it's running, where it's executing, where the memory and CPU are executing on my host, and I basically move the underlying VHD or VHDX file at the back end. And so those technologies basically go into the Shared Nothing Live Migration, which I'll show you in a second. And basically now I can go into the Hyper-V management console, and I can basically just move a machine without needing any shared storage. I guess we've also broken down all of the other VM mobility scenarios. I can migrate or do a live migrate from one cluster to another, which you can't do today. From a cluster to a standalone, from a standalone into a cluster, I can do all of those things, which I've never been able to do before. And we're actually seeing a lot of interest from this in, say, the hosting providers that want to just use locally attached storage on a machine to meet a particular price point for a virtual machine that they want to sell, and this gives them a lot of flexibility around where they actually run that machine around without incurring downtime, without having to stop a VM, do an export, copy, and re-import, things like that. We've got much better scale inside Hyper than what we've had before, and I'll come back to that one. I'll come back to that one in a second. Also, a bunch of cluster enhancements, and I'm not going to go into any great detail around these. We've got an entire session on clustering here at TechEd, which I think is on tomorrow, Friday. Okay. But just a couple of the little hot points around clustering. We've basically built application-aware monitoring into Cluster 2012. So if you are running Server 2012 VMs from the pure clustering point of view, I can basically peer into those VMs without needing to use System Center, and I can find out, not just has my VM had a blue screen or a kernel panic, for example, but I can look and see, hey, is an event fired or not fired? Is a server started or not started? And then make some decisions about what to do about that VM in terms of live migrating it or rebooting it. We now do a simultaneous live migration and a simultaneous storage live migration. Out of the box, the default is 2, and you can basically whack this up as high as you like. The bottleneck is not going to be Hyper-V, it's going to be your networking fabric that you're using to copy your VM runtime from one box to another. We've also got affinity and anti-affinity rules, which basically let you group VMs together. So if I live migrate my SharePoint box, move the SQL box as well, and also anti-affinity rules to stop two VMs from commingling on the same host at exactly the same time. We also now fully support BitLocker on the drives that you're storing your virtual machines on. Also, this other great, interesting new feature, which we haven't seen a lot of press about, which is called CSV block cache, or Cluster Shed Volume Block Cache. And it's a little bit like a RAM disk. Basically, I can just whack some more memory into my server. Great for doing VDI type scenarios where I've got a pull desktop VM and I need to read that VM in lots and lots and lots. I can just basically stick some more memory into my server, and then that entire pulled VM will be read into memory rather than me needing to go and hit the I/O of my server to bring that out. And lastly, around clustering, we also do live migration queuing. So if you've left the migration default at 2 and you want to live migrate 10 boxes, basically it'll go 2, then the next 2, then the next 2, and you can basically queue all of that out natively inside the clustering console. You don't need to have System Center. Number 5 here, Hyper-V Replica. This is something we've had a lot of great feedback from here in New Zealand in particular. This is basically inbuilt, out-of-the-box disaster recovery solution. Essentially what it does is it does an asynchronous replication of a VM from one server to another, from one site to another, from one customer to another. So I might be a partner that wants to sell something like a disaster recovery as a service solution and charge my customers $100 a month or whatever to allow them to replicate a VM into my infrastructure ready to be ready for a tsunami or a rangitoto to blow up, or something like that. So it's very, very simple the way that this works. And in fact, there's an entire session on this. I think it's either Thursday or Friday, where Ben Armstrong from the Hyper-V product group is going to do an entire session on this. But great feature, and I'll show you what the UI looks like in a second. We're also doing a lot of hardware offloading technologies now inside Hyper-V, with being able to do single root I/O virtualization just natively in the box. In fact, even in the free Hyper-V server, which came out this morning as well. All of these features that I'm talking about around Hyper-V are also in the free bare metal Hyper-V server 2012 that you can download off the web. If you go to microsoft.com/HVS, you can download Hyper-V server right now. One of the other great ones around hardware offloading is something we call ODX, or offloaded data transfer. And this is basically a new SCSI 3 command that we can work with SANs that can be upgraded to this new command. And essentially what it does is it offloads doing storage commands like doing a virtual machine clone or copying a huge amount of data around, inside my VMs. It basically offloads that into the SAN rather than me having to bring that data from my SAN, back to my workstation, then back to another LUN on my SAN. And if you go to Stu Fox's session, which I think is on after this one in NZ2 or NZ1, he's going to be doing a demo of that ODX feature. Another interesting hardware feature that we're doing is virtual fiber channel. So I can basically now directly present a virtual HBA into my Hyper-V VM. So if I've got a fiber channel SAN and I need to have, low latency, high speed connections directly into a VM, I can do that as well. Number 8 here, guest NUMA support. Maybe not a lot of you are dealing with workloads that use NUMA yet. You need to have fairly big boxes and you need to have NUMA-aware workloads like SQL 2012, for example. But basically what we do is we project a virtual NUMA topology from the underlying host hardware into the virtual machine so that it gives it the optimal performance and workload scalability when you are running a VM with multiple vCPUs and a lot of RAM. And basically, it's as simple as we take something that's quite complicated to get right into basically a single tick box that you tick inside Hyper-V when your VM is off, and it basically uses the hardware topology and it will automatically scan your hardware and set that up in the best way. We can also do a few new things around memory configuration. We've had dynamic memory for a while, this balloon driver that works with integration services inside the guest VMs. We introduced a few new features around this, and then we can now basically set a startup value for your VMs as well as a minimum value. So your VMs, for example, might start with 1 gig of RAM, and you might allow them to, for example, go down to 512 or 768 megs of RAM or something like that, because typically operating systems use a little bit less RAM once they're booted. And you'll find if you play with Hyper-V now and you play with the dynamic memory features, you can actually up the amount of dynamic memory that you've set as the maximum inside your VM while it's running, which is something that you couldn't do before. And then the last one here, number 10, and again, Stu Fox in his Hyper-V session will be going into a lot more detail around this particular feature. But you guys probably know what the Hyper-V network switch is. That's been built into Hyper-V forever. It's obviously the way that VMs connect to the outside world. We've done a huge upgrade to this, and we basically now make it extensible. So we often come across customers that need to be able to plug in different switch architectures. They need to use, for example, the Cisco 1000 Nexus V switch, and we can just directly plug a switch like that into Hyper-V. And it's pretty much as easy as writing a network card device driver, and you're going to see a range of different networking vendors actually creating these switch extensions. So you can think about like antivirus, layer 7 application inspection, port mirroring, port filtering, port ACLing, all that sort of stuff is basically exposed through this Hyper-V network switch. Let's just quickly talk about some of the scale enhancements, and then I'll just give you a really quick demo. These numbers are basically correct as of 3 a.m. this morning for the final release. We've actually upped these numbers from what we announced in the release candidate version just a couple of months ago. And I guess when you think about scalability and performance, it's one of those things that is never done. People always want more scalability and performance. And if you take a look at these numbers, I think you'll find that you guys will be pretty hard to find an x86 Intel workload that can't run now on top of Hyper-V. We've done a huge upgrade here, from 4 vCPUs up to 64, from 64 gigs of memory inside a VM up to a terabyte. One of the numbers here that we just announced this morning is supporting. We basically doubled the number of VMs we can run in a cluster from 4,000 to 8,000. So there's some, and a bunch of these numbers are industry leading. The fact that we can do 320 logical processors in a host, that we can do 4 terabytes of addressable RAM inside the host, 2048 vCPUs per host, that's also industry leading. 64 terabyte virtual hard drive per virtual hard drive, that's also industry leading. Everyone else is basically only doing 2. And in fact, that's per virtual hard drive. So we can have up to 255 virtual hard drives per VM. So 255 times 64 terabytes comes to about 15.9 petabytes. So you're probably going to run out of storage before you can run out of virtual storage that you can present into Hyper-V. So let's try and figure out which machine to switch on to here. Wow, first time lucky. So just a couple of really quick little things here. I'll just show you a VM that's off. Just one thing quite quickly that you'll notice that's new inside the Hyper-V console now is the fact that this is the place that I can set my storage migrations and my live storage migrations. And like I said, the default is 2. In production, you guys will be wanting to be using Kerberos to do this rather than Cred SSP, like I've got mine set up. And just a couple of little things that you'll immediately notice inside your VMs. This is the place now where I can add virtual fiber channel adapters into my VMs. You'll notice a bunch of new settings around network adapters in terms of working with hardware acceleration like VMQ if your hardware supports it, server root, single root I/O virtualization if that supports it. And let me just show you another VM over here. Keep on losing my internet connection here for some reason. I'll come back to that one. Sorry about that. And before, when we're talking about live migration, I just want to very quickly show you where you basically go and do that. If I go and click Move inside here, it basically is going to bring me up the option around how do I want to move. So these are my two choices. Do I want to live migrate the VM, or do I want to live migrate the storage? And that's basically the interface that you're going to go and do that. I put in my server name, and away I go. And I'm not going to do that because it's a pretty boring demo, but I just wanted to show you where it is that you go and do that. So, a bunch of new things are around Hyper-V, and I'd really encourage you to go to some of the other sessions that go into a lot more detail around it. But we're really pleased about what we've done here. And I think, for the first time, we're not chasing VMware around performance and scale. It's really the other way around. So just very quickly, here's the other Hyper-V sessions that are on. I encourage you to go to the What's New that's after this. If you want to look at Hyper-V Replica, there's also a session around that. So next area I want to talk about is management and automation. And I think this is an area where it really shows the kind of deep level of thinking that we've been doing around what it takes to operate Windows Server 2012, at a cloud scale. And a lot of this learning we've basically built in based on what we've found from running things like Windows Azure, and Bing, on top of Hyper-V today. So, bunch of new things here that I think you guys will just love. And the first one is that we've done a complete redesign to design Windows Server to be remotely manageable and to basically give you a single interface that you can use to manage a whole bunch of servers, whether you're managing one server or whether you're managing 10 or 100. And the way that a lot of you guys might be doing this today is basically remote desktoping into each server individually, and doing that. Or you might be jumping in backwards, forwards between a bunch of different MMC templates or a bunch of different MMC, snap-ins. And so what we've tried to do is basically give you one single interface that does all of these things. And one interface that allows you to manage virtual machines, physical machines, and also VHD files that are offline. So we can basically mount a VHD offline, add stuff into it, and then you can go and deploy that, and when it boots up, it'll have all the, it'll have those changes and things that you've done into it. Now, the first, one of the first things that you need to get your head around is that we've introduced a whole bunch of new options around how you can actually deploy Server 2012. Now, what you guys are probably familiar with is deploying, a full version. And what you'll find, just like on Windows 8, we've designed this to, same kind of look and feel of Windows 8. You've got a start button that basically comes up when you move your mouse to the top left and top right. You've got the chance bar that comes up when you go to the right. Personally, I'm finding on a server I don't really use that chance bar on the right. What you're probably going to find is that the default. What you are going to find is the default now when you go and install Windows Server 2012 is basically Core. And probably not a lot of you are using Core today, and there's probably some damn good reasons why you're not using Core. And probably the number one reason is that when you install Core and you decide that I didn't want to do that and I want to move up to full, today or yesterday you guys are up for a reinstall. With Windows Server 2012, we can basically move between full and Core and back just with a reboot. And we've also got this other kind of interesting kind of middle environment that we call the minimal server interface. Now, Core is just like it is today. We give you an sconfig command to be able to manage it and things like that. But I mentioned that there was this middle ground called min shell, or the minimal server interface. And on the outset, it looks very similar to Core, but the really interesting thing about this is that I've got the ability to run Server Manager. I've got the ability to run the MMC. So, I've got the things that make, Windows Server useful, but none of the things inside Windows Server that expose it to extra risk, like a media player and an Internet Explorer and things like that shouldn't be there and need to be patched and things like that. So I can basically remove those things, and I've got a few choices around the way that I do this. I can do it through the GUI, or personally the way that I like doing it is with PowerShell. And I can, for example, do a get Windows feature, and you'll see if I do this, you'll basically see the two different interfaces that we have here. So this is min shell, and you see that just this one number X here is basically is highlighted because all I've got installed is Server GUI management infrastructure. And for example, if I wanted to convert this box into full, I would just type in that's add Windows feature, Server GUI shell -restart, and that's basically going to add that feature and add it to my basically add the rest of the shell onto my server. But you see here, I've got the MMC. I can basically add everything into it, and I can also add that role through here, as well. I guess just while we're in here, let me show you a few other things that the Server Manager tool does. And like I said, this is going to be a tool that I think you guys are going to, are really going to quite like this. When you install a new Windows Server out of the box, it's going to look like this. Don't be alarmed. This is not a modern UI application, the thing that we used to call Metro. This looks like a modern application, but it's just a Win32 app. But it's got some of the same kind of design things around. This is designed to be a bit of a dashboard into what's happening across a whole bunch of multiple servers. So essentially what I've done in here is I've gone through and I've added a whole bunch of other servers to manage. And I've basically gone through my AD, I've done a search, I've done a filter, and I've basically added a whole bunch of other servers into my environment. And when I've done that, it's basically gone out and it's discovered all of the roles that exist on my servers, like DNS. And for example, you'll see that I've got 4 Hyper-V servers here. You'll see that it shows me that I've got, that's the reason that one is red, is I've got one event right now that's causing me problems. I've got 55 other servers here. This one here is telling me that I've got a service that hasn't started. So it immediately tells me this service was meant to start, it didn't start, and through a couple of clicks I can right click on that and I can tell that service to start. there's a bunch of things here that I think you'll find that once you start using Server Manager, it really makes Windows Server a lot more manageable. Even being able to go in and highlight a whole bunch of different servers and look at the events, look at the events across all of those servers, to go in and search for a particular event and filter on those, and I can save those. I can save those as a query. I can go down here into Performance Monitor, and I can configure performance alerts and be alerted if my CPU usage goes over a particular amount of time. A bunch of really useful things inside there. Now, another thing, just before I go back to the slides, a lot of you might be using PowerShell today. We've actually done a pretty big upgrade to the way that PowerShell works inside Server 2012 as well. Some of you might be using PowerShell from the command line. Some of you might be using the PowerShell integrated scripting environment. You'll see that when I do go into PowerShell here, we've basically added a lot more smarts into the way that PowerShell works. I can go in here and I can search for a particular commandlet and I can find it, and I can basically bring up help, and it will show me all of the things that are related to that, to that commandlet, so I can just get it right, out of the start. And I can go in, I can type in my particular thing, and I can run it directly from that GUI. And if you don't like doing that, I can also basically run the PowerShell integrated scripting environment. And what the ISE does is it gives me a little bit of a debugging engine. So I can go in, and so for example, I could do something like, get Windows. You'll see that we basically get IntelliSense. It's showing me all of the commandlets that relate to what I've been typing in. I can essentially pipe that through and go where installed equals true. So we've also tidied up the underlying syntax for PowerShell and made it a lot easier to use, a lot easier to get your head around. And I think once you guys start using this, start using the kind of built-in help. Also go in here. You can also turn on snippets as well, which help you, like do macros and share around commandlets as well. So a bunch of really cool things inside Server Manager, inside PowerShell. Yep.
Is that a new version of PowerShell?
This is PowerShell 3. I believe so the question is this a new version? And yes, it is PowerShell 3. I believe you can install this down level. But I think you can only install it onto Windows 7 and 2008 R2. I'm not sure you can go any further back than that. With Server Manager itself, this can actually manage down level. So if I just drag back up here to the top of my servers, you'll see that some of these are saying online, some of them are saying this WinRM3 service is not on. So by default, out of the box, this Server 2012 Server Manager tool will manage Server 2012. If you install the WinRM3 service on your older servers, on your 2008 R2 and your 2008 servers, you'll also get all of those features that I showed you in there. Basically everything except for the BPA stuff. So the Best Practice Analyzer is also built in. You don't need to go and install that. We can manage down to 2003, but basically on 2003, all we can do is tell you whether the server is basically on or not. So it's, on a 2003 server, it's not particularly useful. But 2008 R2 will bring in all the events, all the performance manager information as well. So, pretty useful. Okay, a couple of other things I didn't talk to you about. Just really quickly around PowerShell, you should also be aware that workflow engine built into it. We can also handle disconnected sessions. So if you run a script and have it execute overnight, and your WAN link goes down, or someone reboots the server that you are remotely managing, when that server comes back up, basically the script will continue on. And one of the other brand new things that we also do is give you a PowerShell web interface. And it looks very, very similar to what I showed you there through the integrated scripting environment, but you just get it inside a web browser, including on a mobile device. And this will basically let you manage through a PowerShell web access gateway essentially any version of PowerShell that's able to be remotable. Okay, so it'll let you manage 2012 and also down level as well. So, a couple of the other sessions that we'll be talking more about this. We've got a session tomorrow, crash course on PowerShell. Great skill that all of us as IT pros should try and get our head around. A session tomorrow afternoon where we'll be talking about all those different versions of Server Core and Minimal Server Interface and the full version and what you need to know about that. Collectively, we kind of call those different things features on demand or FOD. And also, lastly, on Friday, if you want to know about Server Manager and remote management, come along to Rick Claus's session. He'll be doing that on Friday afternoon. He's a great presenter, and that'll be a really, really interesting session if you want to know more about Server Manager. Okay, next area I'm going to talk about is around storage. I think this is an area where this is going to get quite disruptive. What we're doing here, inside the Windows Server file server role, and you can kind of think of this, all these features collectively, as stuff that we're doing for the next generation file server. The first thing is that we've built in this really interesting feature called storage spaces. That is going to allow you to deliver this new category of virtualized storage at a much lower price point than the way that you structure your storage solutions today. Basically, what it lets me do is group a whole bunch of different locally attached storage into my servers. So, any which way I can plug it into a local server, USB, SATA, eSATA, direct attach. I can basically present those physical disks into Windows Server with any of those kind of interconnects, and then I can create virtualized storage pools across those underlying physical disks, and I can also choose the underlying level of protection that I want for the files or for the virtual disks that I'm running on top of that. So we can choose parity, we can choose stripe, we can choose two-way mirroring, three-way mirroring, and all of that is available just out of the box, and it gives you a very similar level of protection as RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5. And Rick again has got a session where we'll be going into a lot more detail around what Storage Spaces does. If I get time at the end, I'll show you a very, very quick demo of Storage Spaces. We've also got a brand new file system that we ship inside Server 2012. It's called the Resilient File System. And it basically is going to give us the ability to deploy huge volumes, volumes that exceed the capacity of NTFS today. And we've really taken a new approach to correct, identify, and eliminate transient errors that might happen on your file system. You've got these cosmic rays coming from halfway across the galaxy, and if one of those hits your spinning platter when it's trying to do a write, you have the potential for corruption. That's what check disk is for. Check disk is also a real pain if you reboot your server during the middle of the day and you don't hit no, I don't want to check this disk right now, and your server's down while it's doing a check disk for the rest of the afternoon. So one of the new things that we do as part of this is we can basically do online spot fixing, where we can get in, get out, and we can actually fix volumes while they're being in use. So online analysis, much more improved self-healing for the resilient file system. We can also do thin provisioning of disks now as well. So this is this, get thin, stay thin, things that you'd normally only get in a SAN. So I can create, a 64 terabyte volume that might only be using, a terabyte of space, on the disk. So thinly provisioned. Probably another one of the big things here, SMB3 for workloads. This is really interesting for SQL 2012 and for Hyper-V 2012. I can now just have a low-cost, cheap Ethernet fabric, and I can basically run my VMs and run my SQL databases just across that Ethernet fabric. So I can basically set up a file server, turn on this new thing that we call basically it's an active file cluster, and even if I've got a VM running on there, which has basically got an open lock on my VM, if that cluster node goes down or I want to move the owner of that node, everything keeps running. We're able to fail over open handles inside SMB3 from one node to another with nothing bad happening at all. So really interesting, this ability to decouple your workloads from from locally attached storage onto a server, which is how you might be doing it today. And I think really interesting for the larger customers that are buying fiber channel HBAs and then buying two of them for having high availability, for not having a single point of failure in their servers. Now you can just do this, with say for example RDMA cards, and it's going to be a lot cheaper to be able to do that. NFS support, we basically support NFS 4.1 as part of Server 2012, and we also do iSCSI targets directly inside Server 2012 as well. So a couple of plugs for some of the other sessions that are on here this week. Friday morning we've got a session specifically on clustering. Thursday afternoon we've got a session specifically on REFS and storage spaces. So next thing we'll quickly talk about is networking and a bunch of the cool things that we're doing around networking, and I'll just go through these pretty quickly. A huge thing that all of us have been waiting for a while is the ability to do NIC teaming. So we can now do up to 32 NICs, load balance, failover inside Server 2012. None of this complicated third-party add-on software. It's just directly built into Server 2012. You can mix and match server NICs from different vendors. You can mix and match speeds. We take care of all of that. Also DHCP failover built in, so the ability to scan, isolate and respond to unexpected server problems in the DHCP role. So this is like having a DHCP cluster that's not inside a cluster. So rather than you having to split your scopes manually inside two different DHCP servers today, we can do this automatically through creating this failover DHCP server. And we've also got another session specifically on this as well. For the first time, we've also brought resource metering into Server 2012 as well. This helps you to do historical trend analysis, to do chargeback. So this will let you do basically resource metering for usage of your I/O, for your network, for your CPU, that you could use for billing, or things like that. Okay, let's go on. So a great session. We'll basically be talking about all of the new kind of networking features, but specifically doing a drill down with a whole bunch of demos around NIC teaming, around DHCP failover, and around this other interesting new feature that we call IPAM, or IP address management, which is essentially a consolidated interface across all of your distributed DNS and DHCP servers that you might have in your environment. So just really quickly, what are some of the interesting things that we've done around security, identity, and access? Well, I guess the first two, number 1 and 2, dynamic access control and classification, are pretty much the same thing. We've taken the file classification infrastructure technology that we shipped inside Server 2008 R2, and we've made it a lot more useful. So what this does is that when I'm storing files on my file servers, this basically lets me classify the data that's on there. I can either classify it automatically or manually. So I might classify how important that data is to me. Do I want to see that on the front page of the Herald on Monday morning, or do I actually care about what's inside that data? We can do this automatically or manually. I can write rules that look for things like Visa card numbers or IID numbers or things like that. And it can automatically apply access control across all of these. And this, I think, solves a big headache around the way that ACLs work in the NTFS file system. And especially if you have someone that changes job roles or moves a site inside your Active Directory, we can basically now do claims based about who they are inside the Active Directory and basically tailor the ACLs based on that, rather than being a hard set of ACLs done to a user or to a group. And it also does some interesting things around, if a user does get access denied for some data, it gives them a way to basically request access to that data from the person that actually owns it. We've also built Active Directory now for the cloud. Active Directory is a lot easier to manage at scale. It's a lot easier to deploy Active Directory into public and private clouds. It's a lot more reliable in terms of snapshotting, to be able to do snapshots if you wanted to against an Active Directory domain controller. We basically can now safely virtualize Active Directory DCs with this rollback detection through a unique generation ID that we do inside the Active Directory when a VM gets snapshotted. And there's two specific sessions that talk all about this. One of them is going to be mostly demos. This first one here, Active Directory You, Me and I, which is on later on this afternoon. And then we've got another session this afternoon, which is basically what's new in Active Directory as well. And this one's going to go more into a lot of the other features around what I just mentioned about the virtual machine generation ID and things like that. So one of the last areas I'm going to talk about is about collectively what have we done inside the remote desktop services role and also the VDI role. And you guys, if you're in the keynote yesterday, you saw a little demo that we did in the keynote of a Windows RT device that I built on Sunday afternoon. And in a minute I'll just quickly show you what the back end of this is. I'll just build all these slides and then I'll talk to them. So simplified user connection. I can basically now log on to my remote desktop or my VDI infrastructure with just my email address. It's a bit like Outlook Anywhere, where I just need to know my email address and my password, and we can basically go out and automatically discover where your servers are and automatically connect to those. This interesting new, and maybe I'll just show you that right now. Okay, so if you guys were in the keynote yesterday afternoon, you would have basically seen the modern Windows 8 UI for this, and so this is just your typical remote desktop connectoid that I've got to from my control panel. But basically in here, I can now just log on with my email address. And you'll see it automatically discovers the remote desktop web access server, the one that is right for me. Okay, and then it should ask me for some credentials. And what this is going to do is basically based on what resources I have made available to me, these things here will basically get directly put down into my start menu. So if I go into my start menu here, I've basically now got these apps remotely published in here. And this is kind of what you saw inside the keynote yesterday. I can't remember what application they did yesterday, but great way to kind of provide remote apps out to people and a much simpler log-on experience for someone. And I guess it's even simpler. I think when they did the demo yesterday, they were using the modern desktop for doing that rather than the desktop UI that I showed you there. So I just wanted to quickly show you what that log-on experience looks like. Okay, so a couple of the other things here, user profile disks. This is a really interesting way, particularly for those of you that are doing, pooled desktops where you want to have a gold image. This is a way for me as a user to store all my stuff, my user home directories, and this is going to be captured. Every time I log in and log off, all my stuff is going to be stuck back into this user profile disk. It's going to get automatically mounted into my session when I log in. Number 3 here, share session virtualization. This basically this gives you a predictable user experience when I log in through remote desktop session host or the thing formerly known as terminal services. So we now don't just look at the number of sessions, we look at the amount of disks, the amount of CPU, the amount of network, and we do fair sharing across those. Also, this great new quick VDI wizard that lets you get a VDI set up in about 5 minutes out of the box. We can also do now concurrent redirection, so I can now redirect users who do not have an existing session on the server over onto remote desktop servers that don't have many sessions on them. And probably the biggest kind of upgrade here for both VDI and remote desktop itself is what we've done for remote FX. And we've got an entire session on remote FX. I think it's this afternoon. But remote FX is all about is about making the experience of running Windows remotely as close as possible to running it locally. And so you think about if I'm a doctor trying to look at X-rays, if I'm an architect trying to look at CAD applications, if I'm trying to play high definition video, those are all things that don't work so well through the RDP protocol. You layer on remote FX into that. Remote FX now works across the internet. It now works across the WAN, whereas yesterday it only used to work across the LAN. And the underlying RDP protocol itself is up to 80%, less bandwidth compared to what we're doing today with remote desktop. So collectively, a huge set of features there. And the remote desktop session is on this afternoon. It's on, must be straight after this. So let me just give you a quick summary. What is new? What are the things that you've kind of never been able to do in Windows Server before? Well, you've now got one consistent platform that you can deploy on premises. You can deploy into someone else's cloud, or you can deploy in a hybrid infrastructure of basically stretching across both of those. That gives you all these things here. Complete virtual machine mobility without needing to use a SAN or without needing to set up clustering. High availability NDR without needing to set up complicated third-party plugins. So that's inbuilt Hyper-V replica, inbuilt network card teaming. Unparalleled virtual machine density and scale, up to 64 vCPUs, up to 1 terabyte of RAM. These virtual storage pools that I'd really encourage you to go and watch Rick's session about, that'll let you create the largest virtual disks on the market, and combine that with storage spaces will let you do thin provisioning, and will let you plug in more disks later on when I start to run out of space. Basically equivalent to SAN performance, but at a much lower price point through using things like hardware offload data transfer and RDMA cards for giving you really fast storage access. Complete secure multi-tenancy inside Hyper-V through the new virtual switch, through resource metering, and also through quality of service and data center bridging, which is a new standard that you guys might find when you go out and buy your new servers. Your racks of servers use data center bridging. And then the last thing here, some of the new stuff I've showed you around anywhere and any device access. And we now work cross-platform. We now work on different browsers, really well as well. So collectively, we are really we're really pleased about what Windows Server 2012 is all about and what it gives you. It's the best platform for deploying private clouds, whether you are thinking about Hyper-V, whether you're thinking about the storage features, and I've not even talked about every single feature. I've kind of run out of time. I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about data dedupe, and that's another great feature. I've for example, at home, I've got a 250 gigabyte old hard disk that's basically got 1.7 terabytes of data on it through using data dedupe that's built into Server 2012. So, I'd really encourage you to download Windows Server 2012 if you haven't already. It's available on TechEd now, as a trial. If you go to that Windows Server launch URL, you can also basically earn some points there and go into the draw to win some prizes. Follow me on Twitter or follow my blog, and we'll be announcing when we're going to be doing these free one-day hands-on labs in New Zealand. And I'll leave it at that. Now, I've got a prize that someone's going to help me. How do you want to do this? Hey? So I've got a great prize here, but you can't win this if you're a government customer or if you're what was the other category? Government, just government. Okay. So quick fire question. What's the build number of the final version of Windows Server?
200.
Okay. You shouted it out. You meant to put your hand up, and I was going to. Yeah, hang on. I got to think of another one. What was the build number of the rest candidate? Put your hand up. Who's going to go first? Are you allowed to win? You're a speaker. Think of another question. I gotta get off stage. Let's think of a question.
This is the best presentation I've ever been to.
Let's figure out how to do that later. We'll